They say it took 6 days to make the Earth. How did they know it was 6? How can you even define a day before you knew what a day was? Nobody understands time and what it really is, if it's driven by Chronos or moves of its own accord. Time had to be broken for man to exist, and nobody knows if God fixed that break, or if he wanted to see what we can do with that particular problem. Would it define us? Would it make us the ultimate joke because we think so small?
Grab your boots and your hat because it is time to jump back into the mysterious hole of time and space as Prime Video has just dropped Season 2 of Outer Range. But first, let's get the conversation going in the comments below. What did you all think about this finale and its ending, but also your overall thoughts of Season 2? Did you have a favorite episode or character or plot? Which season did you all prefer? And what theories or deeper meanings did you all take away from this new season? And lastly, what unanswered questions would you hope to get answered in a new season? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. With that out of the way, let's break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. We open the finale with Royal remembering the last time he had his whole family together, and that was right before Rebecca left as he and Cece travel south to get Amy from the women's shelter. We see Cecilia questions how many people does Royal think travel through the hole. We have the young and older version of Royal who was pushed and went into the hole back in Season 1. We have Perry who jumped in back in Season 1 but also willingly jumped in at the end of this episode. And we also have Joy, who we'll talk about later. She wasn't pushed or jumped to the hole, but she just walked and stumbled upon this past timeline, but she also got a chance to meet her new friend who went by the name of Fallen Star. Now, we learned earlier in the season that Fallen Star came from 1976, and later in this very episode, we also got two new characters who fell into the hole, and that is Wayne and the younger version of Amy. Now, speaking of Wayne, we cut to him calling his son Luke after discovering Billy's dead body as he leaves him a message calling him Cain. Now, this being a reference to the story in the Bible of the brothers Cain and Abel, who were the two sons of Adam and Eve after being thrown out of the Garden of Eden. Now, the story goes, Cain killed Abel because God accepted Abel's sacrifice but rejected Cain's. With this act of jealousy, Cain became the first murderer. Now, this being a comparison to Luke being jealous of his younger brother Billy and killing him in their fight back in episode 7, but also being an example of many biblical stories sprinkled throughout this show. As Wayne leaves a message Luke telling him,
because of what you did, what's left of your soul melt your poisonous heart.
As we watch Wayne laying over his dead son's body and mourning him, we also hear Billy singing Fleetwood Mac's Dreams in the background song during this scene. As Wayne takes fire to all those stuffed owls he's kept as trophies over the years and proceeds to burn his own house down. Now, to me, it was interesting that none of the Tillersons saw this happening in their visions of the future after taking the mineral. We cut to Barry, whose journey this season took him back to meeting his younger versions of his parents after looking for Rebecca in the hole. Now, Perry's at the point in the show where he's caught between staying back in the past timeline and continuing to run away from his problems, and or jumping in the hole, which has returned, which can land him in a completely different timeline or take him back to his proper time frame. As younger Royal tells Perry a story about a firstborn son being indecisive and not making the right decisions as it relates to Perry not being where he needs to be, as Royal tells him that he needs to go back home and pushes his son into the hole. Now, to me, this was a very risky move from the young version of Royal because nobody truly knows where the hole will take you. Can a person actually choose their destination in their mind, or is it left up to the hole to determine where they need to be? We'll be discussing that later in this breakdown. Now, since this was the last of the young Royal storyline this season, let me briefly share my thoughts on this particular plot. Now, while I thought the performance by Christian James, who played Royal, was spot on to imagining a younger version of Royal, and seeing that Cece and Wayne dated in the past added context to this family beef, but honestly, overall, I really didn't care much for those moments. I just didn't feel Perry really didn't learn much from his time with his father and really didn't change as a person or a father or a son or a brother, but also I was under the impression that he was really there to not only find Rebecca in the past, but that somehow got forgotten throughout the season, but also I thought after a while he was going to be there to make sure that his parents ended up together, kind of like a Back to the Future situation, but that really never went anywhere besides him being upset to see his dad kissing some random girl beside the ranch. But my main issue with this particular plot, and one of my biggest frustrations with this season, is the lack of the explanation of the whole and how someone like Perry could interfere with the future with his actions and not having a moment of consistent cause and effect. Now, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but it appeared that Joy managed to change the past when Royal killed his dad. In the present day, Royal's memories were all different because of what happened, but Perry's time in the past so far hasn't changed anything in the present. Now, sticking with Perry here for a minute, back from being dropped from the hole, and he sees several cars outside of the Abbotts' home, and we know as an audience this has to be a different point in time because we know that most of their Abbotts are not home and they're currently out looking for Amy. Now, Perry looks into the window and realizes this as well as he sees his mom and Amy sitting watching television together as he rushes into his truck and looks to stop something terrible from happening. As Perry drives to the bar in the moment that changed everything for him and his family back in season 1, and that being the moment he killed Trevor. As the events play out, Perry yells out to himself to stop and distracts himself only for Trevor to hit him in the throat, which leads to Perry hitting the back of his head to the concrete and seamlessly dying on this timeline. Now, Trevor ends up seeing future Perry and runs off as he takes his own body, and Rex arrives shortly after and sees the blood left behind. We cut to Luke and adult Amy/Autumn discussing his wants as he replies he wants ownership over the West pasture, but Amy questions what would he do if that's not meant for him. Now, he claims that this isn't something he's thought about, but he does see her leading people in his visions with him by her side sometime in the future. Now, clearly, Luke is still in disbelief of what happened between him and his brother as he begins to cry as Amy is able to put together what happened between the two brothers, but she reminds him that nothing is final, not even death, as this was a callback to a line that she used back in season 1. Back at the Tillersons, Wayne sits inside surrounded by fire as he eventually heads outside seeking vengeance and answers from the unknown as he says,
Called me. Show me.
Wayne, now completely broken and lost, he arrives to the hole. He wants to know if he's being tested and wants to know why his life has fallen apart, and he wants a sign. As suddenly a light glows from within the hole and the ground begins to shake, Wayne is told something from the hole and he believes it all makes sense as we watch him jump into the hole. Now, I think that he was told, or at least he believed he was told, that he can change the present by going back to the past and maybe bringing back his son Billy, or maybe even going further back in time and forcing Luke to live with his mother, or maybe he'll land elsewhere. Stick around to hear my theories about where Wayne might end up. As older Amy and Luke arrive to the shelter, as she lies her way through the front gates by telling them that she's Rebecca's sister and Luke is her brother, we watch as older Amy speaks to younger Amy and manages to manipulate herself by bringing up how much she's missed back at home. As older Amy makes her way over to her mother Rebecca, and this being the first time as an adult that she gets to meet her actual mom, or at least as we know, as she tells her that she's actually Amy. Now, she manages to convince her that she's Amy by going over details that nobody would know about the time when she left her dad, Perry. Now, older Amy threatens to tell her younger self everything unless Rebecca lets her go with her, and she eventually does. But before leaving, older Amy wipes the mineral on her mother's face as she sees a vision of Amy telling her that she's never really been a mom as her followers surround her. Now, a couple things I want to point out. We never actually learned who Autumn was on the phone with back in season 1 when she was calling someone for money and referring to them as her mom. Now, it was never confirmed if that was Rebecca or a foster mom, but also I believe the people that we see following older Amy in the future visions are possibly a mixture of the women from the shelter and maybe others from Cece's congregation. And I say that because it's pretty clear that most of these people and the followers are easily manipulated. We see Cece and Royal finally arrive to the shelter, but clearly they're too late as they find Rebecca is still affected by the effects of the mineral as she tells them that Amy is a gift for time. Now, this is a bit of a crazy theory, but stick with me. I'm starting to think that Amy/Autumn is a result of her grandfather Royal being displaced from his proper timeline, and maybe the exposure of the hole or its minerals were maybe passed down through his bloodline, and maybe Perry and now Amy are affected by this. Comment your thoughts below what you think Rebecca meant by calling her daughter Amy a gift for time. As Royal and Cece call Autumn, trying to stop herself from throwing herself into the hole but aren't able to convince her to stop, we see Royal calls Joy to intervene and stop them by any means possible. Now, Joy's PTSD isn't explored a ton after she returned from 1886, but when she hangs up the phone from Royal, you'll notice that she's outside a realty company and it's owned by the same family whose ancestors tried to kill her. Now, since we're talking about Joy, I'll discuss her plot more in depth in my character breakdown, but I really thought that her storyline was definitely one of the more interesting ones throughout this season 2. Now, while all this drama is going on, we have Rhett meeting with the doctor/scientist from BY9 and makes a deal with her to cut him a check for $30,000, and that amount will grow more over time as he tries to convince his father Royal to allow the company to survey their land. Now, the doctor agrees to his terms and is tasked with protecting their land from any others like herself. I think it's safe to assume that this is what led to what Royal saw when he was pushing a hole in season 1, where BY9 was mining the material from the ground and when Cece told him that the land was no longer theirs. But the question is, will Rhett either be taken advantage of by this company, or will he willingly give BY9 the full access to taking over at some point in the future? But besides that last minute scene, and I'll talk about this in my character breakdown, Rhett and Marie felt completely unnecessary this season and absolutely had nothing to do. Now, speaking of Marie, we see her taking money from her job at the bank, which this was back-to-back scenes for us seeing them willing to make bad choices to get money, most likely in hopes to go to Montana as planned. As we wrap up this season finale, we see Perry throwing his past self's dead body into the hole, and I believe that he's happy because he can now replace himself as a way to start over in this new timeline where nothing after episode 1 of season 1 happens as far as him being guilty of killing Trevor and forcing the ranch to be auctioned and leaving his daughter behind. Now, back at the present timeline, at the hole, we see Joy shoots out Luke's tires and knocks him out as well to prevent them from throwing Amy into the hole. As older Amy grabs a gun out of the glove compartment and holds it up to her younger version's head, and she slowly walks towards the hole with Amy in her arms. As this is happening, we see Royal is having some type of heart attack or stroke, which makes me question, was this connected to what was going on with Amy? Is this caused by two versions of the same person in contact with one another? Or was this setting up the stage or the path of his death, something that we saw in his vision back in season 1? Him having his heart attack / stroke is cut between Joy managing to shoot the older version of Amy in the chest as she's still able to push the young version of herself into the hole. As to me, this kind of mirrors Joy not being able to save the young version of Royal when he jumped into the hole. At the hospital, Cece learns what happened to Amy and doesn't really seem too affected as she goes to pray with her members from the church. We see Amy flatlines at the hospital bed but awakens just as the young version of herself is waking up at a desert land. We see two strangers find Amy and she doesn't know her name and know where she comes from as she tells him that she believes her name is Autumn. Now, I was a bit confused on why Amy wasn't able to remember what happened or even her own name, because if we think about all the previous characters who either fell or were pushed into the hole, none of them lost their memory. So my working theory is all those other characters were shown climbing or crawling out of the hole versus landing on their head. So maybe the impact caused her to forget everything except for the name Autumn? Let me know your thoughts on why you think young Amy lost her memories. Cut back to different timeline, Rhett finding his older brother outside of their house as he clearly seems to be happy to start over as we head back to the hospital where Royal's in the bed beginning to have a nightmare. Now in this nightmare / dream, he sees his entire family present as Cece and everyone begins to tell him,
"Time is a river, Royal. This is your destiny.
Time is a river, Royal. This is your destiny.
Time is a river, Royal. This is your destiny."
Now, Royal eventually wakes up from this nightmare / dream, and Joy catches him up to speed to what just happened. As he tells Joy that the future's coming and he needs her help, as he hugs Cece and tells her that everything will be okay, which we know is a complete lie, something that he's done before in the past. I want to go back and talk about this dream / nightmare because everyone in this scene seemed to be a family member of Royal at some point of his life, but who was this woman and these kids? Is this the same woman from episode 6 who Royal was kissing behind the ranch? Now, remembering all of these characters are members of Royal's family or bloodline. So my question is, did Royal have another kid or kids with her before getting together with Cece? Because we obviously know Perry, when he went back in time, we found out that they always weren't together. Or did Royal have an affair and a secret family on the side? If so, I hope this is revealed in a possible season 3. But before getting into more of my theories and what I hope to see in the future, let me share with you all my overall thoughts on this finale and this season. As far as the finale goes for me, I thought it was one of the better episodes of a season that I found quite uneven. The finale provided some intrigue and had some highlights, but it didn't completely stick the landing as well as I thought season 1 did. Now, I'm going to come out of the gate and just be honest with you all. I personally thought season 1 was head and shoulders better than season 2. Whether that be from a narrative perspective, the mystery of it all, the character development, the stakes, all of the above to me was significantly better than it was in this new season. The only thing I would say was not necessarily better, but at least on par with season 1 was the performances. All the actors are committed to their characters, even if I felt they were maybe in the same spot than they were in season 1, or maybe they just didn't do much at all. But the acting to me in the show is just overall great. Now, to stick with the positives, there's some solid foundation and some themes that are consistent from season 1, whether that be the idea of escaping from your present or future by running to the past to fix things or running away from them entirely. Examples being Perry, who couldn't live with the fact that he accidentally killed Trevor or the fact that his wife left him and his daughter without reason. He decided to go back to not necessarily fix things, but try to escape, and eventually found a timeline in which he can reset things, but I'm not sure it's going to be that easy. I look at a character like Joy, who wasn't escaping or running from anything from her present timeline, which, by the way, it wasn't really explained how she was able to travel back in time without actually going through the hole back in season 1, but her discovering her land and finding the tribe of people that she was able to fight side by side with and going against the people that tried to take their land, to me, that was a really great character story and a great plot for her dealing with the present day and her experiences of being gay, but also some people in town not being happy that she's the deputy of the town. So I really like what they were doing with Joy in this season. Another theme that I liked was the idea of questioning the character's belief in religion and being followers. This being showcased through both characters, Amy/Autumn and Cecilia, who earlier in the season questioned her beliefs, but also really set the stage for Autumn/older version of Amy, creating her group of believers and giving them the path of enlightenment. And lastly, one of the other themes I like that carried over from season 1 into this new season was the representation of this hole. This hole being a way to escape, but also metaphorically, this hole is for the characters' lives and them looking for a way to feel that pain or hate or disappointment or expectations or fear with free falling into the unknown, because they're under this illusion or influence that this hole is, and what is in it is better than their actual reality or their current situation. But jumping to my criticism with this season, and negatively speaking, I felt this season was all over the place and never really gave us answers, but instead it piled on more and more questions and gave unnecessary subplots. Here's my list of storylines in the order in which I felt it was handled poorly from worst to best. I remember nothing against the acting, but how I felt that these characters were underwritten, how much time we spent on these unnecessary storylines. Number 1 for me for worst plot of this season was easily Rhett and Marie. We start with them hitting the road, which lasted all but 2 seconds before he was brought back to look for Amy, which, by the way, Amy's disappearance was explained at the end of episode 1 of this season that she was with her mom the whole time. And from there, we just saw Rex with him mostly having scenes with him with his shirt off or in bed, until the writers decided to set him up towards the end of this season with him working with a doctor from BY9. Which I just felt was a complete waste of time for most of this season, but also add on the fact that Marie has literally nothing to do but follow his lead and take money from the bank. I just feel like they could have written both of these characters off for most of the season and having them had gone on the road to Montana, and maybe by the end of this second season, we wrap them into BY9 in the mix and having Rhett possibly being set up for a traitor for his family and replacing their scenes with exploring more of the whole or maybe more of Amy and literally anything else, because I did not care for this side love story, and I felt that same way back in season 1. Number 2 for me is little Amy and her mom Rebecca, but you can also throw Lewis into the mix. Now, they showed us that little Amy was dealing with these dreams that she was having of her older self, and they never really explained or went into detail with that. But another thing that bothered me was Cecilia finding out that Rebecca was having an affair, and that was never outed. Is it me, or was that not frustrating? And I'll just say this about Lewis, it kind of bothered me how they used the character, and I'm not saying it was like racist or anything, but it was just kind of unsettling to see Cecilia going to him at first with the shotgun, then going back to apologize, and literally less than 24 hours later, hitting him with a wrench, Roy having a gun to his head. I just felt like they didn't know what to do with Lewis, and the stuff that they did decide to do just made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. Did you all feel the same? Number 3 for me is Cecilia and her dealing with her belief and everything going on with the church. I don't understand her lack of faith at the end of season 1 and into this second season, but I felt her joining them in prayer by the end of this show was rushed, and even the church dealing with the whole idea of them lending them the money for Perry's bail and saving the ranch was just rushed and poorly executed and completely took away from the stakes of the situation. Number 4 for me is the Tillersons plot line, starting off with the head of the family, and that's Wayne, who was just all over the place, and the show positioning him as this intimidating individual did not work at all this season. I mean, the character would literally go from he's going to rain hell on Royal and his family in episode 1 of this season after finding Billy being shot in the hospital, to being willing to give Cecilia $500,000 if she can convince her husband to apologize and give him the land, to trying to intimidate or scare the judge to reverse the decision on the house, to the floating scene in the air with his son, just all over the place. And quite frankly, it kind of made these characters feel like they were a joke. Speaking of a joke, the wife of the family, which I don't know if the actor was just busy, but they just completely forgot about that character. But Luke and Billy, that drama was getting interesting, but they just had Billy sidelined for most of the season. To me, Billy's without a doubt the most interesting character of his family and one of the most interesting characters in the show. And I get that the show wants to shift the focus on Luke and him dealing with the thirst of power. But to me, Billy is just so wacky. He's a wild card, and I just think that he adds this kind of unnerving, you don't know what he's going to do next to the show, and I feel like he was severely missed. But overall, I just wasn't a fan of how they used the Tillersons this season. Next, we have Perry and Royal. I talked about them earlier, but Perry past timeline stuff was great acting. It had some interesting moments, but overall just kind of fell flat, especially when the plot was absent for 2 straight episodes, and it just felt like they just forgot about it. There was no sense of urgency or danger going on besides that fight scene that he had between him and Wayne. Which leads me to saying the best plots of this show in this particular season is without a doubt when we switch over to Joy, Royal, and Autumn/older version of Amy. Those to me, when they were on screen, that's the lifeline of this season. That is the best parts of the show, and that kept me engaged throughout this season. Now, finishing up this video with my unanswered questions and theories for season 3. The biggest question that comes to mind that didn't get answered this season is what and where did this hole come from? The only slight answer was from the BY9 doctor who told Royal that this thing in the ground is time and space flowing together, and you can even think about older Amy saying that time has no beginning or end, that all these events are occurring all at once. But I even put that to question because why did Joy experience 4 years in time while being in 1886 versus only being missing for a few days? As the show really never explained, how long was Perry in his timeline? Was it weeks? Was it years? How about my whole issue with cause and effect? As I mentioned earlier, how was Joy able to be displaced in time and affect Royal's memories of killing his father, but why wasn't cause effect applied to Perry being in the wrong timeline? And one last thing with the whole, we saw characters using the mineral as a drug to see into the past and the future. It's starting to make me think that this has to be created from some experiment, possibly by BY9, maybe way into the future. It got out of control, and this hole just started to find itself in different timelines. I really do hope that if there is a season 3, that we kind of get back to the whole idea of the Greek mythology and Kronos being responsible for splitting time and space. Another thing that comes to mind is we never learn why the older Amy and Royal, when they touch each other's, mountains disappears or stars in space start to travel across the sky. Is it because they're actually displaced from the timeline? We know that Royal doesn't belong in that timeline, but that was never really explored. What about the times we saw characters like Joy and Perry having ringing in their ears and passing out for 30 minutes? Was that a side effect for using the mineral? Quick rapid fire style with some questions here, starting off with where did Wayne go? Is he in a timeline where he's young again, or maybe moments before Billy died? Or will he end up where Perry is and have Trevor alive by his side? We saw Perry drop his dead body in a hole. Where will that body end up? Will the current timeline think that Perry is dead? Which, by the way, the fact that nobody really cared that he was missing for most of the season was just hilarious to me. Going back to young Amy, where she land, is that the timeline in which she becomes Autumn? Because in my mind, Amy must be lost from the future because the land that she's on is like a desert land. No more farms, there's no more grass, so I'm assuming that she's way somewhere in the future. And last thing I want to mention is, are we actually looking at different timelines, or is there a chance that we're looking at alternate universes? Now, I would hope that Prime Video gets the green light of season 3 because we see it all the time nowadays as shows get canceled left and right, especially when you think about when the season 1 first dropped, that it was a different time that we were watching that. We were all kind of at home still watching television, so it'll be curious to see what the numbers are for season 2 and if we'll eventually get a season 3. But if Prime Video does give this a season 3, which I would be up for because there is a lot of stuff that I do enjoy about the show, I really do hope that they answer those questions instead of throwing more and more questions out there, but also doing a better job at balancing the family drama with the science fiction, which I thought was handled really well in season 1 in my opinion. Now that's going to be the end of this breakdown of Season 2 of Outer Range. Make sure to leave your thoughts about this new season in the comments below. From your pros, your cons, your Easter eggs, your theories, or your deeper meanings you all took away from the season. And what do you all hope to get answered in a possible Season 3? Thank you all for watching this video. You all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.